UFC 270, Francis Ngannou versus Ciryl Gane. Welcome to our main card prediction video, Boxing MMA Picks, back at it in 2022. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video and make sure you participate in the comments. But of course, we have to introduce ourselves. He goes by the name of Zan. I go by the name of Harris. We are Boxing MMA Picks, here to give you our fight-by-fight breakdown and analysis from that betting perspective, letting you know which fights are worth the value, which fights you want to avoid, which underdog maybe has the best shot at winning, and some parlay action towards the end of the video. It was mentioned in the prelim that this fight card order does not seem to be set yet. We tried to give it an extra day. Looks like UFC is still trying to figure things out. So what we have done is we have taken the current order on Tapology, 13 fights on this card. We took the first 7 fights according to the Tapology order, and we called it the prelim video. And of course, we're taking the final 6 fights according to Tapology, and we're going to call it the main card video. One thing that we do know for sure, the co-main event and the main event are set in place, not changing. 2 title fights, Brandon Moreno taking on Deiveson Figueiredo, and then the main event, Francis Ngannou taking on Ciryl Gane. So let's get to the final 6 fights. Again, according to the Tapology order for this UFC 270 event, we're going to call it fight number 1 of the main card. And the fight that we're looking at here is Michael Morales taking on Trevin Giles. In our usual fashion, I will break this fight down first. Morales is making his UFC debut, another fighter coming from the Dana White Contender Series. Again, watch our prelim video for a reference of how many Dana White Contender Series fighters are making their debut here. He won in September. Young fighter, fights from the outside. We see he's going to have a 5-inch reach advantage, although the same height. So definitely going to use that advantage that he has from the outside. Not really as active as a striker. From what I want to see from him, he is a bit more on the technical side from striking perspective. But he did show me that he's willing to engage in clinch situations, attempt the takedowns. I wouldn't necessarily call it a strength of his. I wouldn't look too deep into that 4.0 takedown average number. Of course, it is based on one Dana White Contender Series fight. But like I said, willing to do that, and that means he's not just a one-dimensional fighter. Trevin Giles, he lost to Dricus du Plessis back in July. We know Giles to have a decent wrestling game. We know him to have decent clinch work against the cage. We know that he can be taken down, but in general, pretty decent takedown defense, pretty decent balance. Also has that ability to get up if he is taken down. I can see that playing a factor potentially in this fight if it doesn't stay on the feet. On the feet, Trevin Giles, good hands in the stand-up. He's patient, shows level changes, good fakes and feints, good long jab, good combinations, good in and out footwork, and almost an underrated striking speed. Good distance control. He looks like someone that is sort of improving on the feet, even though he was already pretty decent above average, I would say. I think Morales would have to sort of knock Giles out to win this fight. And the reason I think that is because Giles, to me, is the cleaner striker. Giles, to me, has the better ground game. Giles, to me, also has the ability to control the pace of the fight. Like I said, Morales doesn't really impose his style. He's not really as active as a striker. Didn't really impress me in his Dana White Contender Series win. I think Trevin Giles is too big of a test for your UFC debut on a pay-per-view card. I understand Morales is undefeated at 12-0. I understand Morales is the favorite at -130. So Vegas definitely believes he has that shot to win. But I think Trevin Giles is too big of a first test for you. And like we mentioned in the prelim video, like we mentioned very often last year and carrying it over into 2022 as well. Sometimes your first performance in the UFC is not your best. Sometimes it is your second fight. This is Michael Morales' first fight, and that's a potential risk. So I wouldn't be able to take that risk with Michael Morales being the favorite. So I do like the underdog here, Trevin Giles. He's going to be my pick.
Yeah, this is a tough one, man. There's a couple of things I like about both fighters. Trevin Giles, One concern, he's going from 185 down to the 170-pound weight class. So he's going to be losing weight, losing some water weight to get down to that limit. So that's something you got to look at. We really don't know how he's going to look at that division, whether or not it's going to help him. When you look at Morales on the Contender Series, his stand-up's a bit green to me as far as his technique. But one thing I was really impressed with was as the fight went on, Morales was getting better, and his cardio is really good. And late second, third round, this guy is fighting like it's the first round. So that's where Giles can get in trouble here, is because of the cardio. And I think that could be an issue for Giles. Morales coming on late as the fight goes on, and cardioing Trevin Giles, because Trevin Giles has shown that he doesn't have the best cardio. He can go 3 rounds, but if the fight is at a certain pace, he's gonna have an issue. And when you look at Morales as well, another thing you got to look at in his back pocket, he can look at his wrestling. He was on the Ecuadorian wrestling team, so this guy knows how to wrestle. Now, Ecuador is not one of the wrestling powerhouses, so I'm not sure how hard it is to be on that team, but he clearly can grapple to be on that team. And this is a tough fight because Morales coming into the UFC. It's his first fight. Trevin Giles has fought in good fighters. He's fought in the better guys. He's proven a bit, and I think early on, Trevin Giles is going to look like a good fighter in this fight. I think he could win this fight, win the first 2 rounds. But I think as the fight goes on, Morales can definitely pick it up. So it's a tough fight. I should really go Morales because of the cardio. But I'm going to go with you. I'm going to go with the underdog, Trevin Giles here. Just having the better stand-up. He fought a guy in the Contender Series, and I think Trevin Giles has a better striking. Trevin Giles should win the striking exchanges with Michael Morales. And if Trevin Giles negates some of the wrestling, I don't think Morales has the jiu-jitsu. He has the wrestling. So I'm not sure he's really that. I'm not sure he's going to be able to keep Trevin Giles on the mat. So I'm going to go Trevin Giles to get it done. But again, there's a lot of question marks. He's coming down in weight. He's fighting a brand new guy that's first fighting the UFC that Dana White is high on. So this definitely can go either way. I wouldn't place a bet. But I'm going to go with the vet. I'm going to go with Trevin Giles to get the win.
Let's move on to the second fight on what we're calling the main card order. We're looking at Rodolfo Vieira taking on Wellington Turman. I won't spend too much time on this fight. What I will say about this fight, just as I load it up here on ESPN, is that neither fighter is too reliable. Both of these fighters aren't really that trustworthy. Both of these fighters kind of present the same weaknesses in that they're both very beatable on the feet and they both have cardio concerns. I think in this fight, Vieira, pretty solid on the feet, I will say, good pop, decent technique. Of course, we know he's a true BJJ specialist, black belt, 5-time BJJ world champion. We know that he has strong wrestling to go with that, combat sambo accolades to his name. We know he has a really good takedown game. We know that his cardio is very bad. And we know that once he's tired, just doesn't really offer much at all. Definitely looked a lot better in his last fight than he did 2 fights ago when he beat Dustin Stoltzfus back in July. For Wellington Turman, he himself is considered a BJJ practitioner, looking to take that fight to the ground, looking to use his clinch ability, his takedown ability, some wrestling ability with the frame that he has. In terms of his stand-up, his hands are pretty heavy, hard jab, bit of a slow striker. The hooks are powerful, kind of lunges into it though. And he loses exchanges to faster punchers. I don't think Vieira is the faster puncher here, but I've seen Turman lose a lot of striking exchanges. So that could be a potential concern in this one. Now, what's funny is that I actually think Wellington Turman is probably a little less trustworthy of the two. Although I think he might have the stand-up advantage, if you ask me, in terms of being a little bit more diverse of a striker, being a little bit more intentional, with his striking, whereas Vieira is much more of a setup style of striking. I think Turman doesn't necessarily have that IQ, and I think because of his BJJ ability, I think he's going to try to grapple with Vieira because that is a strength of his. But I do think that Vieira, being the more credentialed grappler, will show why he's more credentialed, and I think that could potentially cost Turman the fight. What I will say is, you definitely want to avoid betting on this because, again, two very unreliable fighters here. But I think Turman is going to do things that makes him lose the fight, and for that reason, I'm going to go with Rodolfo Vieira.
Yeah, this is a good matchup here to see where Vieira is at now. Vieira is definitely improving his stand-up. He's definitely working on his stand-up. He has the grappling advantage in this fight, but you got to think Wellington Turman is the better MMA fighter as a whole here. When you look at Turman, he's severely gassed out in that fight versus Anthony Hernandez and was submitted. So there's a lot of concerns, but since that fight, he went 3 rounds with Dustin Poirier, actually got a submission in the 3rd round. So he might be working on his cardio. And as I stated, I think Wellington Turman is the better MMA fighter, the better striker. He has jiu-jitsu. He's a jiu-jitsu black belt, but obviously not as good as Vieira. But I think this is going to come down to 2 things here. I think that if Wellington Turman can survive the first 2 rounds, he has a solid shot in the 3rd round to really win the match. But I think Vieira has enough in this fight to get the first 2 rounds. He's only 32. His wrestling, I don't think Turman can stop a takedown in this fight. And if Vieira gets 2 rounds here, Turman, I think, needs to get it done in the 3rd round. And I don't think he can do it. I don't think he can rally back and win the fight at that point. So I'm going to go Rodolfo Vieira here. But again, this is a fight like Harris. Don't put a bet on it. We don't know the cardio of Vieira. And arguably, Wellington Turman is the better fighter. If this fight gets into the 3rd round, these guys are tired. Wellington Turman is going to be at a big advantage at that point. But I'm just banking on Vieira getting the first 2 rounds here. Might even get a finish. He's that good on the ground. His jiu-jitsu, he probably has a top 5, top 3 jiu-jitsu in the whole of the UFC. So I can see him getting him on the mat, ground and pound, getting a finish, or even getting a 10-8 round in the 1st round. And then Wellington has to rally at that point. So I'm going to go Vieira. Tough fight, but I'm going to go Vieira to get this done.
3rd fight of this main card, we have Michel Pereira taking on Andre Fialho. Again, looking at a very tough debut for a newcomer here. A newcomer, of course, being Andre Fialho. For Michel Pereira, he's actually on a 3-fight win streak at this point. He beat Nico Price back in July. Really starting to come into his own as a UFC fighter. We know he's athletically very gifted, but definitely a lot more composed than he was, a couple of fights ago. In terms of the feet, pretty solid striker, pretty complete MMA stand-up, good movement, good fast kicks, good timing as a counterpuncher, very dynamic, almost a kickboxing type of style, if you can even label it. He can get very flashy at times, and we know that he still has that in his game, almost to his disadvantage. Jumping knees, kicks off the fence, showboats at times. But again, like I said, he's looked a lot more composed over his last couple of fights. I still have some concerns for his IQ, but I'm definitely a lot more confident in him today than I was, say, a year ago. If I'm looking at Andre Fialho, again, another UFC newcomer on this card. He's on a 4-fight win streak. You see his record there at 14-3. It looks pretty light on the feet. Looks like he has some hands, some power in his strikes. Of his 14 wins, 11 of them are via KO, TKO. I've seen him fight at both stances, but relatively a one-dimensional fighter. He's going to stay in front of you. He's going to look to strike with you, primarily hands at that. So I'll keep the prediction really short. Like I said, very tough debut for Fialho here. I like Pereira because he should be way more dynamic on the feet between the two. The more diverse striking skill set, the better movement, the trickier fighter. Even if you watch Fialho's loss to Antonio Dos Santos Jr., that going back to October 2020 in LFA, he lost to a striker that was more diverse. He looked like he didn't really have an answer. He looked like he wasn't really able to make adjustments, speaking again to that sort of one-dimensional style that he has. Now, Fialho may always have the puncher's chance, 11 KOs of his 14 fights, but Pereira is a pretty big welterweight. I don't think that puncher's chance percentage is that high in this fight. So I'm siding with Pereira. Minus 300 is steep, but I do feel really good with him, or good going with him. Michel Pereira is my pick.
Yeah, I like Pereira as well. I'll be quick. I think he's going to keep it on the outside, utilize his speed, his striking advantage, and get a decision or a knockout here. I think Michel will get it done. And I think this fight, he was supposed to fight someone else. So Fialho this may be a short notice fight as well. So that's going to definitely benefit Pereira as well. So I'm going to go Michel Pereira to get this one done here. I think Michel was supposed to fight I think he was a Russian kickboxer, a Russian striker. Forgot his name. Muslim Salikov. Right? Yeah, Muslim Salikov. So January 15th. So this, I think, might be a short notice fight for Fialho. I'm not sure if he's been training, but this should benefit Pereira. Fighting a less diverse fighter. He should be able to keep this on the outside, use his speed. Might even get a finish, but I'm going to go Pereira here. I think this is a good parlay piece as well. So Pereira is my pick.
Fourth fight of the main card, we have Cody Stamann taking on Said Nurmagomedov. For Stamann, 2-fight losing streak. He lost to Merab back in May. We saw him get completely outclassed in that fight. Otherwise, he's a pretty solid all-around fighter, pretty reliable all-around fighter. Good patient movement around the ring, good IQ, pretty smart striking, a lot of fakes, feints, level changes, things like that. We know that he has a high-level ground game, high level wrestling, good body lock, tricky things like toe stomps, Chris Lieben style. He can keep his opponent on the cage. He can chain wrestle. We've really only seen him lose to sort of the highest level of MMA fighters. Again, last couple of fights, Jimmy Rivera, Merab Dvalishvili had a draw against Yadong Song. And he's a fighter that sort of, even when he does go to decision, a lot of them are close fights. He has 2 fights that he won via a split decision win, 1 split decision loss. I mentioned the majority draw against Yadong Song. So he's going to be somebody that always finds himself in a close fight. And that could be a concern from a betting perspective. If I'm looking at Said Nurmagomedov, he last competed quite a while ago, October 2020. He beat Mark Striegel at that time. Good lateral movement, good striking. He's a pretty high-level, diverse striker, good calf kick. Being Dagestani, you have to kind of assume he has the wrestling, although I wouldn't say he's as high of a wrestling level as he probably could be. Doesn't really use that in his game. A lot more of a stand-up artist. And that makes this a really interesting matchup here, because on paper, Cody Stamann has that proven wrestling. On paper, Cody Stamann could resort to that. If Nurmagomedov can't stop the takedowns, then he's in trouble, right? If he can stop the takedowns, then he's in a really good spot, as I think he's a lot more dynamic and dangerous in terms of his striking. The Dagestani background has to give you at least some belief that Said Nurmagomedov can effectively stop that takedown or effectively nullify that takedown. And that would kind of make him the clear pick in this fight. But you do have to be careful. It's not a guarantee by any means. Cody also doesn't necessarily perform that well in big fight situations. Like I said, even before the fights that I mentioned, he lost to Aljamain Sterling. He had a draw versus Yadong Song. He lost to Jimmy Rivera. He lost to Merab Dvalishvili. So when he takes on sort of bigger ticket names, he doesn't necessarily perform. Because of those different factors, and because of a bit of a gut pick with almost trusting his nationality, I am going to go with Said Nurmagomedov on this. I do trust him more in this spot. I think he has some advantages on the feet, and if he can keep it there, he should have a pretty solid time and a pretty easy time. So I'm going with Said Nurmagomedov. He's going to be my pick, minus 205. I can't be too mad at that either.
Yeah, for me, this is a tough one because Nurmagomedov, I don't think he trains with Khabib and those guys. I think he trains with, I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but I think he trains somewhere in New York. Yeah, so he's not going to be, he doesn't have that wrestling approach that Khabib and those guys have. This guy's he trains with Valiev. Like, these guys like to strike. They have wrestling, but they prefer to keep it on the feet and keep it standing. So this is a tough fight because I think Stamann can definitely out wrestle. I think there's a chance he's the better wrestler in this fight, and if he is, he's gonna be able to bank some rounds. But I'm gonna be quick here. I think Said is aware of that. I think Said is more the well-rounded fighter. I think he knows more. I think he has more ability, and I think that he should be able to negate some of the takedowns, cause a lot of damage on the feet, cause a lot of damage. But again, this is a tough fight. I could see Stamann winning this fight using his wrestling. He's high level, been in there with really high level fighters. As you stated, he's been in there with the champion. So this again, yeah, this is a tough fight, but I'm gonna go with Said here to negate some of the takedowns here, keep it on the feet, and win a striking match. But again, yeah, this is really tough. This is hard for me, but Said's my pick.
Let's move on to the co-main event of the evening. We have Brandon Moreno, Deiveson Figueiredo, part 3. Of course, UFC Flyweight Championship is on the line here. And I actually won't spend much time on this at all. Of course, this is our third time talking about these two fighters taking on one another. You know, I really want to go with Deiveson Figueiredo on this one. I went with Figueiredo on the first fight. I went with Figueiredo on the rematch. And I'm very compelled to go with Deiveson Figueiredo and potentially be wrong for the third time in this fight as well. It wouldn't surprise me if he pulls it out, but I have to think about, you know, what's the smarter bet in this situation. I think the smarter bet is Brandon Moreno. We see him there at minus 175. So the odds are still close enough where you will get good money on Moreno. You know, Moreno has looked vastly improved fight over fight, especially seeing how that second fight went. You really have to like what Moreno looks like in this one. You know, Moreno looks like he can resort to his wrestling at this point. Moreno, if I'm not mistaken, was out grappling Figueiredo in their last fight. We know that Moreno should carry his pace better over a 5-round fight, whereas Figueiredo will definitely slow down. So, you know, in the past, I would say Figueiredo is my pick again, in sort of hoping that he wins. But I think the smarter pick is Brandon Moreno. When I see minus 175, I'm not turned off by that. So I just have to side with the champion. Fight number 2 showed me a lot. I know Figueiredo will make changes, if I'm not mistaken. I think he's training with Henry Cejudo. But, you know, Moreno just looked too good in that second fight for me to go against him. So I'm going with Brandon Moreno. I think he will retain his flyweight championship here. Minus 175 is pretty good odds as well.
Yeah, I don't know about that last fight, the fight they had. I'm not gonna lie, I really think to this day, man, that fight, something was up on that fight. Either Figueiredo came in that fight sick, or that fight was flat out fixed. Like, the way Moreno won that fight, I don't believe it. But the fact that Figueiredo is getting a rematch and he's the next fight up, I'm not sure if there's any funny man business on the UFC side, but I think Figueiredo gets this one done here. I think he was sick in his last fight. And that being said, I think Figueiredo keep it on the feet enough, land the harder strikes. I think he's gonna get it done. That second fight, I don't believe it. And so I gotta go with Deiveson Figueiredo because I still think he's the better fighter. I still can think he's a better striker. I don't think he's a better wrestler. But I think he can do better than what he's shown me in the second fight. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that fight, but I'm gonna go Figueiredo here, keep it on the feet, and do what he should have done in the second fight. So I'm gonna go Figueiredo win this one.
Let's go on to our final fight. In that case, main event of the evening. We have Francis Ngannou on the final fight of his contract, where he said that he's not renewing unless a lot of improvements happen to his contract. And of course, he's taking on Ciryl Gane, Ciryl Gane being the interim heavyweight champion. Of course, heavyweight title on the line, undisputed heavyweight title on the line in this fight. We're looking at two former sparring partners. Definitely a lot of interest in this matchup. Francis Ngannou, we know he last competed in March of 2021, of course. He beat Stipe Miocic at that time, pretty impressive fashion. Showed us some improvements in that fight, an improved wrestling skill set, better takedown defense, better reversals, more offensive wrestling as well. Showed us a little bit more agility in that fight on the feet, a little bit better footwork. The striking looked a little crisper. I do expect him to fight from the center of the octagon, and he still kind of has his moments where he strikes wildly. So again, old habits die hard. But we know his strengths at this point. Big, dangerous striker, touch of death power, someone that you definitely don't want to engage with. And going up against Ciryl Gane, he is exactly that person to not engage. He doesn't mind a boring fight at all. We saw that in the Derek Lewis fight, where he last competed back in August. He's happy, staying light on the feet, staying bouncy, fighting from the outside. Fast kickboxing strikes, long rangy jabs. His jab is really good, really fast, well timed. Good counter puncher. He can control the center of the octagon from what I've seen when he wants to, but again, pretty effective in terms of fighting from the outside with his movement. Very smart striker, very patient striker as well. Again, more than happy to keep the pace super slow, keep it super methodical, keep it super technical. Ultimately, this fight is the bigger striker in Ngannou taking on the better striker in Ciryl Gane. The question that you have to ask yourself in this fight is pretty obvious. Can Gane use his movement to avoid the touch of death power of Ngannou for 5 rounds, or will Ngannou catch him, right? He was able to do it for the Derek Lewis fight, but Ngannou does present a much more difficult challenge, while potentially presenting more power if we were to potentially compare his power to Derek Lewis's. Cardio could be a factor in this one. Ngannou, for as impressive as he looked in his last fight against Stipe, he did slow down a bit, and I counted it. About 4 minutes into round 1 is when I noticed his movement started to slow down a bit, although he was still very effective in that fight, of course. I did notice that it sort of slowed down a bit, whereas Ciryl Gane really keeps up the same pace for 25 minutes. I'll keep it short, though. I like Ciryl Gane in the spot. I think he's going to have a huge advantage in terms of his movement. I think he's going to game plan really well to avoid the power. I think he's completely fine with not engaging, making it a boring fight, whereas Ngannou acknowledges, he said it himself, his advantage, and he's almost dependent on his power being the equalizer in this fight. These two guys have sparred before. They kind of know who the better person is. Ciryl Gane looks really confident in this one. Francis Ngannou's having a lot of contractual, not issues yet per se, but a lot of contractual conversations leading up into this fight. So I think he just has a lot of distractions going on, whereas Ciryl Gane seems pretty game, seems pretty ready, seems pretty calm throughout all of this. Again, minus the fact that Ngannou could land that touch of death power, I think the odds, in my opinion, are highly in favor of Ciryl Gane avoiding that touch of death power. So I'm going Ciryl Gane on this one. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if either fighter wins. It is still a heavyweight beware at the end of the day. But Ciryl Gane is going to be my pick. I think he's going to walk away undisputed. And we'll see what happens next for Francis Ngannou in terms of his contract. So Ciryl Gane is going to be my pick.
Yeah. Former teammates fighting for the heavyweight title. This is a good fight. I'll say honestly, you can bet the house on Ciryl Gane. That's my pick. And I think you can bet the house and the cottage on this guy. I think that when you really look at this fight, Ngannou only has that one punch to win this fight. And he's fought in some guys. He's fought in Curtis Blades, has gone to the second round. He's fought in some guys that have taken his power. I think Ciryl Gane can take his power. He's been in kickboxing matches against high-level strikers. He's done well. In my opinion, I think Ciryl Gane is on pace to be the best heavyweight fighter of all time. That's bold. That's a bold statement. But I'm telling you, I've watched every fighter, every heavyweight, and this guy, I'm telling you, this guy has shown me more than all these guys. It's a matter of Gane needs the fights to put on his record to show that he is that guy. I believe it. I believe it. I think that Gane's going to get him into the second, third round. I think Gane can take the power. I think he's too technical. He's going to be blocking the whole fight. I think you can bet the house here. I really do. I think the odds should be wider, but because Ngannou has that mystique, that power, they're keeping the odds pretty close. Almost a pick 'em. It was a pick 'em a couple days ago. But Gane is far better, the better fighter. So I'm going to go Ciryl Gane here to win this pretty easily.
Speaking of betting, we're going to take it to Vegas and we're going to take a look at what some of the payouts can potentially look like here. Let's start with on the main card. Who do we potentially like as an underdog pick?
Underdog wise, I got to go with Trevin Giles.
I'm going to echo that.
He's prelim.
No, he is on the final 6 fights of the current Tapology order, so we're counting him as main card.
Okay, I'm gonna go Trevin Giles and Deiveson Figueiredo.
All right, so let's take a look at what that payout would potential. Well, no, let's just mention them as 2 underdog picks who has a shot at winning. So Trevin Giles plus 110, Deiveson Figueiredo plus 140, 2 underdogs that has a potential shot at winning. I'm going to echo the Trevin Giles pick. My gut very much wants to go with Figueiredo as well. I probably will on fight day. But in terms of for the channel, I'm going to mention Trevin Giles as my sort of underdog pick for the main card. And in terms of favorite picks, who are you taking a look at?
Favorite picks. I like Ciryl Gane, clearly. I like Michel Pereira. What are those odds paying?
Those 2, let's see here, which are my 2 as well. Just fun fact. That would pay a 2.27, just over a double up here. $100 would get 227. $250 would pay out 568. Gonna stick with that.
I think if you want to win money, you gotta hold those 2 picks.
Yeah. And again, I'm gonna definitely echo that as well. So I mean, we're starting off the year pretty similar in some of our favorite picks, pretty similar in some of our underdog picks, both for the main card and for the prelim. And again, as I mentioned, the fight order really mixed up for this UFC 270 event. We tried giving it an extra day. We just went based off of the Tapology order. The first 7 fights, we called it the prelim. The last 6 fights, we called it the main card. So if you're taking a look at this main card video, or if you're watching our prelim video and you don't see the fight that you're looking for, just look at the other video. So take a look at the prelim or take a look at the main. We timestamp all of our fights so you can more than likely find the fight that you're looking for just by checking out the other video. But we are going to sign off. Before we sign off, please make sure you subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit those thumbs up. Make sure you comment as well. We want to hear from you how you feel about our picks, how you feel about, the main event, the co-main event. Who are some of your parlay picks that you're looking at? Which underdog do you feel has the best value? Or even if you're just critical of our picks, we definitely want to hear from you. Participate in the comments below. But let's finally officially sign off. This has been UFC 270, Francis Ngannou versus Ciryl Gane. main card prediction video. And in our usual fashion, he goes by the name of Zan. I go by the name of Harris. And for 2022, our goal is to definitely make this money.
Let's do it, man.